At my dream restaurant's grand opening, I waited for my family, but not a single one of them walked through the doors. I stared at the empty tables I'd decorated for them myself, realizing I might have made the biggest mistake of my life. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. The night had started perfectly. The smell of roasted garlic and thyme filled the Blue Finch, the little restaurant I had spent 4 years building from scratch. The string lights glowed warmly, jazz hummed softly, and my name shone proudly on the sign outside. For once in my life, I felt like I'd done something right. My parents had promised they'd be there early. My sister, Mara, said she couldn't wait to post pictures of the food. Dean, my fiancé, told me he'd bring flowers. I saved the best table in the center for them, set with the blue linen my mom loved and candles that flickered like tiny hearts. Guests began arriving, neighbors, old co-workers, people who had followed my pop-up meals around town. I smiled, served, laughed. Every time the door opened, I turned, expecting to see my family. But it was never them. The night grew later, and my chest started to feel heavy. I told myself maybe they were running late, maybe they got lost, maybe there was traffic. I kept checking my phone between orders, refreshing messages that never came. By 9, the crowd thinned. Strangers clapped for me, congratulated me on how cozy the place felt. I thanked them, but inside I was crumbling. My dream night felt hollow. The one table meant for the people I loved most sat untouched, the candles burning down to nothing. When the last customer left, I locked the door, leaned against it, and let out a shaky breath. I was too tired to cry. I cleaned the tables slowly, stacking plates, wiping crumbs, pretending it didn't matter. It was almost midnight when my phone buzzed. A message from Mara. For a second, my heart lifted. Finally, an explanation. Maybe an emergency, maybe an apology. But when I opened it, my knees nearly gave out. It was a picture. My parents, Mara, and Dean all sitting around her dinner table, smiling with glasses raised. Under it, she'd written, "Family dinner night. We missed you, winky face." I stared at the screen, the kitchen light buzzing faintly above me. My hands shook. The photo didn't feel real. Dean's arm was around Mara. My mom looked relaxed, my dad laughing. None of them looked like they'd even remembered what tonight was. I sank onto the counter, the phone still glowing in my palm. My mind went blank, then burned. The laughter in that picture was the same laughter I'd spent my whole life chasing. But in that moment, I knew something had snapped. Whatever family I thought I had was gone. The light from the phone screen still glowed in Alara's hand long after the picture disappeared from her. Her stomach twisted as if she had swallowed something sharp. She placed the phone on the counter and stared at the floor tiles until they blurred together. The kitchen smelled of cold butter and smoke. The laughter from that picture kept replaying in her head, louder than any sound in the empty restaurant. She tried to tell herself there had to be some mistake, but deep down she knew better. This wasn't carelessness. It was familiar. It was the same quiet rejection she'd felt since she was old enough to notice her parents' eyes lighting up only when Mara walked into a room. Alara had always been the one who worked too hard, talked too little, and never quite got it right. She remembered being 12, showing her father the pie she'd baked from scratch. He'd smiled politely, then said, "Mara helped you, right?" Mara hadn't. When Alara was accepted into culinary school, her mother sighed and said, "Cooking's sweet, but you should think about something real." Mara was already managing her first office job then, calling herself the responsible one. Even Dean used to laugh and say how impressive Mara was, though he never noticed the way Alara's smile stiffened when he said it. Now, seeing them all together again, she understood. They hadn't just forgotten her opening. They had chosen not to come. The realization felt like a door closing somewhere deep inside her. Every late night, every hour she'd worked to make tonight perfect. It had all been for people who had no place in her world anymore. Alara picked up her phone again, scrolling through old messages. The last one from her mother was a week ago. "We're proud of you, honey. Can't wait to see the restaurant." She almost laughed at that. She wanted to call, to scream, to ask how they could do this. But instead, she turned off the phone and set it face down on the counter. She walked through the dining room, past the chairs she'd arranged with care. The table meant for them still sat in the center, napkins folded perfectly, wine glasses untouched. The candles had burned to their base, leaving little pools of wax on the wall. She stood there, silent, the air heavy with the scent of roasted herbs that now made her sick. Her heart didn't break all at once. It cracked in slow, quiet ways, understanding spreading like a bruise. She thought about every time she had believed things might change, every time she'd forgiven too easily. This wasn't bad luck or poor timing. Mara had known exactly what night this was. She'd made sure everyone knew. Alara ran her fingers over the tablecloth one last time, then turned off the lights. The blue finch went dark, and so did the part of her that still believed her family would ever show up for her. Morning light crept through the blinds, thin and gray. Alara sat on the floor of her small apartment, still wearing the clothes from last night. The silence pressed against her ears until her own thoughts filled it. Every memory she had of Mara surfaced one by one, like photographs she didn't remember keeping. Mara had always been the polished one, smooth voice, perfect hair, the kind of person who knew how to make every room revolve around her. Teachers loved her. Strangers trusted her. Even when she lied, she did it with such grace that people called it charm. Alara used to envy her, then fear her, and finally learned to stay quiet just to keep the peace. When they were kids, Alara would spend hours baking, trying to surprise their parents. Mara would stroll in at the last moment, sprinkle sugar on top, and call it teamwork. Their parents never saw the difference. When Alara made it into the local paper for winning a food fair, Mara claimed she'd taught her the recipe. It was small things back then, little cuts that didn't bleed until later. She remembered the first time Dean came into their lives. He'd been a friend of Mara's college boyfriend. He noticed Alara's cooking at a backyard barbecue and asked if she ever considered opening a place of her own. Mara laughed and said, "She dreams too much, but she means well." Alara pretended not to hear, but the words had stayed with her. Still, Dean kept coming around. He liked Alara's quietness, her focus, her steadiness. Or at least, that's what she thought. There was one night she never forgot. A family dinner, too much wine, and Mara leaning close with her voice soft and syrupy. "He's only with you out of pity," she'd said, smiling like she was sharing a secret. Alara had laughed it off, told herself Mara was drunk and jealous. Dean had brushed a kiss on her cheek later that night, and she believed that meant the words weren't true. Now, sitting alone, those words felt like acid in her chest. Every laugh, every compliment, every moment of support Dean had given her, she could see Mara's shadow behind it. The way Mara touched his arm too easily, how Dean never pulled away fast enough. The way her parents looked at Mara as if she could do no wrong, while Alara's success was treated like luck. Alara stood and walked to the sink, running cold water over her hand. Her reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, tired, hollow, and older somehow. She thought about the photo again, about the way Dean's arm rested around Mara's shoulders. It wasn't an accident. It was the end of a long pattern she had refused to see. For the first time, she didn't feel sad. She felt clear. The perfect sister had finally shown her true face, and Alara was done pretending not to see it. Alara drove through the quiet neighborhood with her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The sky was pale, washed out, the kind of morning that carried no warmth. Her parents' house looked exactly as it always had. White shutters, trimmed hedges, the porch swing creaking softly in the breeze. It felt smaller now, like something she'd already outgrown. Her mother opened the door before she even knocked. "Alara, honey, we were going to call," she said, voice too bright, eyes darting past her. The smell of coffee and buttered toast drifted from the kitchen. Inside, everything looked peaceful, as if nothing had happened. Her father sat at the table reading the paper. Dean was there too, leaning against the counter, staring down at his mug. Alara didn't waste time. "Why didn't you come last night?" The question fell heavy, cutting through the easy morning air. Her mother blinked, searching for a word. "Oh, sweetheart, Mara said you had to delay the opening. Something about plumbing." Alara stared at her. "Plumbing," she repeated. Her voice was calm, but her chest tightened. Dean shifted, still not meeting her eyes. "We didn't want to bother you," her mother continued. "Mara said it was stressful enough already." Her father lowered the paper, looking uncomfortable. "We figured you'd tell us when it was rescheduled," he muttered. Alara turned to Dean. "And you believe that? You didn't think to ask me?" Dean's jaw moved, but no sound came out for a moment. "I just didn't want drama," he finally said. "You've been so tense about everything. I thought maybe it was for the best." "For the best?" she said, her voice shaking. "For the best that you all sat around her table instead of mine?" The silence that followed made the clock ticking on the wall sound painfully loud. Her mother started to say something about misunderstanding, but Alara lifted a hand. "Don't," she said quietly. "Just don't." She could see it clearly now, Mara's easy lies, the way everyone swallowed them. No one had even questioned it. They'd believed her, because they always did. Alara looked around the kitchen that had once smelled like comfort, and now only made her feel sick. The photo from the night before burned in her mind. Dean finally looked up, guilt flickering in his eyes, but it was too late. Whatever love she'd tried to hold onto had vanished somewhere between his silence and her sister's smile. She stepped back from the table, her voice steady but cold. "You could have just told me the truth, that you never believed in me." No one answered. Alara turned toward the door, her footsteps echoing through the house. When she stepped outside, the air felt cleaner. She didn't slam the door behind her. She didn't need to. The quiet said everything she couldn't. The next few days blurred into one long stretch of noise and silence. Alara barely left the kitchen. The restaurant stayed closed to customers, but the ovens never cooled. She cooked because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling. Dough rose and fell in quiet rhythm. Knives hit cutting boards in steady pattern. The scent of simmering broth clung to her clothes, her hair, her skin. She moved like someone trying to outrun herself. Sleep came in short bursts on the worn bench in the back room. When she woke, she went right back to stirring, chopping, baking. It wasn't about recipes anymore. It was about control, something she could hold, something that didn't lie to her. Each dish was an argument she didn't have to speak. Her hands shook from exhaustion, but the motion kept her grounded. On the third morning, a knock broke through the hum of the refrigerator. She hesitated, then opened the back door. Rhett stood there, holding 2 crates of fresh produce. He was tall, sunburned, the kind of man who looked like he'd spent most of his life outside. "Thought you might need these," he said. "On the house." Alara frowned. "I didn't order anything." "I know," he said with a small shrug. "Figured you could use the company more than the carrots." His voice was quiet, rough in a kind way. She didn't answer, but she took the crates. He didn't leave, just leaned against the doorframe, watching her move around the kitchen. Over the next few days, Rhett kept showing up with little things, berries, herbs, eggs from his farm. He never asked what had happened. He didn't need to. He just listened when she talked, nodded when she didn't. There was no pity in his face, only understanding. They worked side by side sometimes, chopping vegetables or trying new combinations. His calmness filled the space where her thoughts used to spiral. One night, as they cleaned up, he said, "You've got too much fire in you to let people like that win." She didn't answer, but the words settled somewhere deep inside her. The restaurant started to feel different. Not a wound anymore, but a shelter. The clatter of pans, the heat of the oven, it all became part of her breathing again. She realized she didn't miss her family's approval. What she missed was the idea that they could ever give it. As the days stretched on, her movements grew slower, more deliberate. The storm inside her wasn't gone. It had simply shifted. Beneath the calm, something new was taking shape. Not forgiveness, not peace. Something sharper, colder, more focused. She caught her reflection in the window one evening, hands dusted with flour, eyes steady. The thought came quietly, almost gentle. They'd taken her pride, her night, her trust. She wasn't going to let them keep the ending too. Revenge, she decided, could be served any way she wanted, and she planned to make it unforgettable. Months slipped by, quiet and steady, like the slow drip of rain after a storm. The Blue Finch reopened with new energy. Customers came and went, unaware of the ache that still lived beneath its walls. Alara moved through the days with a calm rhythm, her smile polite but distant. The pain had cooled into something careful, measured, like a flame burning low but steady. One night, after closing, she sat at the counter with a cup of tea gone cold. A small stack of envelopes lay in front of her. Each one bore a name written in her steady handwriting: her mother, her father, Mara, and Dean. She sealed the last one and pressed her thumb against the edge, her face expressionless. The plan had been growing quietly for weeks, like dough rising beneath a towel. She titled the invitations Family Night at the Blue Finch, private event. A warm, harmless name. Beneath it, a message: "I want to make things right. A dinner for just us. I've also invited a few potential investors who'd love to meet you all." The mention of investors wasn't random. She knew it would catch their attention, Mara's especially. Money had always been her sister's favorite language. The next morning, she dropped the envelopes in the mailbox without hesitation. As they slid out of her hands, she felt an odd stillness, not satisfaction exactly, but something close. When she returned to the restaurant, she stood for a long moment in the doorway, imagining their faces when the letters arrived. Her mother's soft gasp of surprise, her father's cautious curiosity, Dean's attempt to sound supportive, Mara's calculating smile. She could see it all as if it were already happening, each of them wondering why she'd reached out after so much silence, each of them too curious, too self-assured, to question her motives. They would come, she was sure of it. Her mother wouldn't want to seem cold, her father would insist on appearing forgiving, Dean would follow because that's what he always did, and Mara would come because she couldn't stand the thought of being left out. For the next few days, Alara prepared. She ordered special table linens, polished every glass until it sparkled, tested new recipes until the air smelled of rosemary and citrus. The kitchen became her stage. Every detail mattered: lighting, music, even the arrangement of chairs. The event would look like peace, but beneath it would hum something much sharper. When the responses came, she wasn't surprised. Each one said yes. Her mother's note was full of exclamation points. Her father's tone formal but warm. Dean's message hesitant. Mara's was short and smug. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Alara placed the letters on the counter beside her and smiled faintly. The date was set, the stage ready. For the first time in months, she felt alive. They thought it would be dinner. She knew it would be something else entirely. The night of the dinner arrived with a calm that felt almost rehearsed. The Blue Finch glowed softly under golden lights, every surface shining as if it were waiting to witness something sacred. Alara stood in the center of it all, composed, her apron spotless. The dining room smelled of roasted meat and herbs, of butter melting over slow heat. Each dish on the long table told a story, one her guests didn't yet recognize. Her parents arrived first, all polite smiles and uneasy warmth. Mara followed, wearing a pale dress that caught the light like polished glass. Dean came last, carrying a bottle of wine and the same nervous grin she'd seen 100 times before. Alara greeted them with measured kindness, her voice soft, her hands steady. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It means more than you think." They sat around the table, admiring the spread. There was honey-glazed chicken, her mother's favorite when Alara was little. Beside it, a bowl of roasted beets, her father's least favorite, though he used to pretend otherwise to make Mara laugh. There was a lemon tart, Dean's request for his last birthday, and a tray of stuffed peppers, a recipe Mara once claimed as her own. Every flavor had a purpose. Conversation started light, the kind that danced around anything real. Her mother praised the food, her father talked about the weather, and Mara kept glancing toward the door as if the promised investors might appear any minute. Alara poured them each a glass of wine and waited until they'd eaten enough for comfort to settle in. Then she spoke. "I thought this meal should remind us of where we've come from," she said. "Each dish is tied to something we shared, or something you took." Her words were quiet but sharp. The table fell silent. Mara's fork clinked against her plate. "What's that supposed to mean?" Alara's gaze didn't waver. "You told people I stole from Dean," she said. "You spread that around town. That's why my suppliers started hesitating to work with me." Her mother's eyes widened. "Mara, that can't be true." "Oh, it's true," Alara continued. "I spoke to them myself. They said Mara told them I was desperate for cash after Dean helped fund the restaurant. But here's the thing. Dean never gave me a cent." Dean shifted in his chair, face tightening. "Alara, this isn't." She cut him off gently. "Don't lie. Not tonight." From under the table, she pulled out a small folder and laid it on the linen. She slid a few pages toward him. "You remember that hotel near the coast? You paid the bill, Dean. Twice." The silence stretched thin. Mara went pale. Her father stared down at the papers without a word. Alara's voice stayed even. "You both thought I wouldn't find out. You were wrong." No one moved. The candlelight flickered between them, bending over faces that finally had nothing left to hide. The food sat untouched now, the warmth gone from the room. Alara leaned back, calm as ever. "Enjoy the rest of your meal," she said softly. "You've earned every bite." The air in the dining room turned thick, heavy enough to press against skin. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mara forced a laugh, sharp and false. "You've really lost it, Alara," she said, voice trembling beneath her polished calm. "This little show, these papers, it's pathetic. You've always been unstable, everyone knows it." She turned to their parents, her tone slipping into practiced concern. "She's been under so much pressure. You shouldn't take any of this seriously." Her mother blinked, confused, glancing between them. "Mara, I don't." But Mara kept talking, faster now, desperate to fill the silence. "She's trying to make us feel guilty for her choices. The restaurant, the failure, everything. It's all someone else's fault, right, Alara?" Alara didn't answer. She simply poured herself another glass of wine and set it down gently. The calm in her face unsettled everyone at the table more than anger ever could. Dean opened his mouth to speak, but his voice caught. Her father rubbed a hand across his forehead, the lines there deepening. The door to the kitchen swung open, and Rhett stepped into the room, wiping his hands on a towel. His boots thudded softly on the floor as he stopped beside Alara. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but firm. Everyone turned toward him. "You should stop pretending you don't know what you've done, Mara." Mara's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" "I heard you," he said. 2 days ago, when you came by pretending to help Alara prepare. You told your mother on the phone that you'd been controlling her story for years. Said you kept her small so she wouldn't embarrass you." His eyes stayed steady on her. "You bragged about turning their sympathy against her. About making sure Dean stayed on your side." Her mother's hand fell away from her cup. Her father's face went gray. "Mara," he whispered, "tell me that's not true." Mara's mouth opened, but no words came. The mask she'd worn for years cracked in the silence. Dean pushed his chair back, the sound scraping against the floor. "I didn't know she said that," he muttered, but no one listened. Alara stood, collecting her composure like a cloak around her shoulders. Her expression was unreadable. "I think you've all had enough," she said quietly. "Finish your meal, and then go. Don't come back here again." Her mother started to protest, but her father touched her arm, shaking his head. They both rose without another word. Dean followed, pale and hollow. Mara hesitated, her eyes darting to Alara's face, searching for some trace of weakness. She found none. When the door closed behind them, the restaurant fell silent except for the faint hum of the lights. Alara exhaled slowly, setting her glass down. Rhett didn't speak. He didn't need to. The truth had done all the talking, and the night had finally tasted like something close to justice. Weeks passed after the dinner that ended everything. The blue finch stayed closed for a short while, the scent of that night still lingering in the wall. When Alara reopened, there were no announcements, no celebration, just the quiet clink of dishes and the steady hum of work. Word drifted through town in whispers. Something about a family argument, about betrayal and truths spilled like wine across a white tablecloth. No one knew details, but everyone sensed a shift. Customers began returning, slowly at first, then more each day. They came for the food, but stayed for the calm that seemed to fill the place now. The dishes tasted different, simpler, more alive. Alara stopped trying to impress anyone. She cooked because the kitchen belonged to her again. Each plate carried her rhythm, not her pain. The warmth in the air wasn't decoration anymore. It came from her, from the peace she built in silence. Rhett became a quiet presence in the background. He helped with deliveries, fixed what broke, and stayed long after closing. When he suggested becoming a partner, Alara didn't hesitate. She trusted his steadiness, the way he asked for nothing. His name never appeared on signs or papers. He didn't want it to. "I just want to see you keep the doors open," he said once, and she nodded. They worked side by side without needing to talk much. Sometimes, while cleaning the counters after the last customer left, he'd hum an old tune under his breath, and she'd find herself smiling. The restaurant no longer echoed with loneliness. It breathed again. One quiet evening near closing, the door opened, and a figure stepped inside. Alara looked up from the counter and froze. Her father stood there, older somehow, his hands clasped in front of him. The space between them felt heavier than it ever had. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," he said softly. His voice carried a roughness that hadn't been there before. "I just wanted to taste your cooking again." Alara didn't move for a moment. She studied his face, the lines deeper, the eyes tired. He looked smaller than she remembered. Without a word, she turned toward the kitchen. Pots clinked quietly as she worked, her movements steady and sure. The scent of roasted garlic and herbs filled the air again, gentler this time. When she returned, she set the plate in front of him and stepped back. He picked up the fork slowly, tasting the food as if it might disappear. His eyes filled, though he said nothing more. Alara watched him eat until the edges of her chest softened. She didn't speak, didn't forgive, but she didn't send him away either. When he finished, he placed the fork down carefully, met her gaze, and nodded once in silent gratitude. She returned to the kitchen without a word, the door swinging closed behind her, the sound of it steady as a heartbeat. Months rolled by, soft and unhurried. The blue finch settled into a rhythm that felt almost like breathing. Mornings began with sunlight spilling across the tables. Evenings closed with laughter and clinking glasses. The place had found its pulse again, and so had Alara. She moved through the kitchen with ease now, her steps unhurried, her hands steady. The sharp ache that once lived beneath her ribs had faded into something. She had made one small change that no one questioned. A single chair left empty near the center of the room. It stayed there every night, untouched and perfectly set, a quiet piece of space she never filled. Customers sometimes asked if someone was joining her, and she always gave the same answer. Not tonight. In truth, it was never for anyone at all. It was for what had once been missing. The staff had learned not to move it. Rhett didn't ask either. He seemed to understand without needing words. Sometimes, as they cleaned up after closing, he'd glance at the chair, then back to her, and they'd share a small, knowing silence. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was closure taking form. The business flourished, though Alara never bragged about it. She treated each guest with the same care she'd once tried to give her family. Strangers became regulars. Regulars became friends. They filled the space with laughter that didn't sting, warmth that didn't demand anything in return. She no longer looked toward the door waiting for faces that would never come. On a late spring evening, after the last customer left, Alara walked through the quiet dining room, straightening chairs and blowing out candles one by one. The night air drifted in through the open door, carrying the smell of rain and lilacs. She stopped at the empty table. The chair sat beneath the soft glow of the lights, its glass gleaming faintly. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a single blue flower, a small bloom she'd plucked from the garden behind the restaurant earlier that. It matched the color of the sign outside, the color she'd chosen when she'd first believed her family would stand beside her. She set the flower on the plate, its petals trembling slightly in the. For a moment, she stood still, watching it. There was no anger left in her, no sorrow, only a quiet certainty that this place, this life, belonged to her alone. The chair wasn't a reminder of who hadn't come. It was a marker of how far she'd gone without them. Alara turned off the final light and headed toward the kitchen, her reflection passing across the window glass. The flower glowed faintly in the dark, untouched. She didn't look back. For the first time, she didn't need to. Hey besties, thanks for staying with me till the end of this emotional story. Imagine building your dream restaurant, waiting for your family to show up, and realizing they were dining at your sister's house instead. Heartbreaking, right? But sometimes betrayal lights the fire we need to rise stronger than ever. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more. See you next time.